All right,
I'm
we
really just
are live. Hello, everybody.
awesome. What's up? What's up? This
We
is
have
Elijah.
Hello.
a special guest with us, somebody who's always on behind the scenes, and we don't have somebody who's usually in front of the screen with us this week. Sam is currently in Korea. He just got there, I think, like yesterday or something, and he'll be there for a little while. So during the summer, Elijah and I are going to jump on office hours on Wednesdays and interview the people who make the class happen that you don't normally hear from. And this week we have Julie.
Brr, brr, brr,
Woo.
brr.
I think there's
He's
actually
like,
the sound effect Sam would play on Discord.
oh,
Yeah.
I was gonna say, where is the sound effects? Dang.
But
I'm
yeah,
making
Differ?
my own sound effect.
you have the birds.
Yeah, I have birds. Hey
Yeah.
guys.
It,
Doing?
do we want to? Should we have Julie like say what her role is at Social 19 first? Or I'm wondering how we should begin the introduction to the amazing Julie. I'm not.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. So wait, Julie, could you just give a little bit of man, because you have this role, but you have so many so many different roles. I'm sure you have, and you did have, So I'm sure we could get into that also, and like how we work together and the role that you did there. But maybe if you just want to start like what you currently do, for
Yeah,
Social 19.
yeah, sure. So right
Awesome.
now, I think in title of the job, I mean the job title is course manager, and
Hmm.
it means I'm just behind everything related to the administrative stuff in class.
Hmm.
So grades, rosters, communication with students. I'm also in charge of Canvas, which is the platform where the students just access to know their grades, also to take attendance. I'm in charge of everything behind attendance,
Yeah.
uh, class reflection, video assignments with the graders team. Um, Sometimes I think over the semesters I'm like getting more responsibilities in terms of the administration of the class, the managing.
Mm. Hmm.
Um, right now I think it's pretty much like that. Also writing questions for quizzes and for
Oh, really?
exams. Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah, that's a learning process. Like I think after 4 years maybe working with the class, this is the
Hmm.
moment when I really feel like I know how to do those questions because
Ah,
it's not easy, but yeah, I think it's like that for 119 right now.
yeah. And how many years in total have you worked for Social 19?
I think four. I was trying to go back, and I think I started on the summer from 2021. Like
Hmm.
I start like joining the team, learning things, like
Hmm.
working with JD at that time. Do you remember JD?
Yeah, Jordan?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah. He used to train too, right?
Yeah, I think he was coordinating something about the World in Conversation for
Yeah.
that 119. I can't remember exactly, but and also the global dialects.
Yeah, he worked on
Oh,
all the
And
okay.
global dialogues.
Oh, okay. That's right. Got it, got it.
mhm.
Yeah, yeah, that's
uh,
JD's awesome. That's cool. So you
I
started
I
working with JD.
a little bit with JD, but I'm remembering right now. I also started working with Joy, because she was
Joey.
like coordinating the summer class at that
Got it.
time.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
then over the fall, I was working with the former TA that time.
Hmm.
So it means like fall 2021, and then after that, I started doing just collaborating with people from the team right now, like Joy, Nish, of course Jeff every time.
Right.
But
Right.
that was my learning path. Like it hasn't stopped yet. Like I'm still learning.
Still going. Yeah, and the role, like your role is still expanding throughout. That's
Yeah,
so cool. Oh, go ahead.
No, I just say yeah.
Oh, oh, I was gonna say like it's so cool that you actually get to write the questions. I didn't know that. What's that process like? Is it, to like try to be in the middle between like too hard of a question or too easy of a question? And also, Jeff, like cut me in if you want to like add something or change something up. But but yeah, what's that like? I feel like it'd be fun in creating the tests. Do you ever get feedback from the students or like somehow if like you're asking too hard of questions or if they're too simple or
That's an interesting question. I think sometimes I have feedback in regards of that was not the answer. I think the answer was this or so, and we need to go back and check. And sometimes we made mistakes, of course, but
Mhm.
over the semesters we learn how to avoid those mistakes, like in like just trying to get the process like in hands. Uh, but
Mhm.
uh, but that's the question.
S-
Like it
Wait,
was hard.
yes. Oh, so you're saying that like as a team you guys have collaborated to like fix errors when it came to like creating the questions on the exam?
Yeah, like pretty much the process is like
Is that what you were saying?
we yeah we usually use some of the previous materials, the materials from previous semesters, but we
Mhm.
change questions. We can use the same video, same reading, but we change the questions.
Mhm. Mhm.
So what we do is like pretty much like between Sam and I. He reads or watch some materials, and I do the same with other amount, and then we create a Google link. Write the questions, and he goes and check, and he lets me know like this is a good question, this is a terrible question, don't do that, or because I also have questions. And he's very good, actually, Sam, in writing the wrong answers, which is, you know what, this is you can believe, but this is the tricky part
Yeah. Right,
to
like
wrong,
make it
yeah,
because
make
that's
it
like
wrong.
yeah, like that's where you have to be kind of creative. Like cuz you know the real answer, but like I
Yeah,
feel like I could see how that would be difficult.
yeah, it's very difficult, and I learned from Sam to do that. So until the point that right now I'm able to do that, and he's approving those questions like, okay, very good, very good.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
from the beginning, my first questions were so elaborated, so academic, so like, according to the author, la 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 la, la. And he was like,
Oh
no,
yeah.
using that because we really, really want to check that people read and watch those materials. We don't want them to feel like they're evaluating in knowledge about something. We only
Mm.
want to double check that they read the materials. So the
Oh,
questions can be like you can find in another class test. Those
got it.
this question is different.
So instead of it being like this, maybe it would be. So like the questions are more like it's like proof that you read it, like you'll know the small nuances that happened in the video versus like describe this concept. It's
Mhm.
or it instead it'd be like what concept were they talking about
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
thing instead of define it. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. And also you have to think from the perspective of a student who is just going over those materials and find what will be that detail that will just live no
Yeah,
live
yeah.
in your mind. Like they're talking
Mm,
about I don't know, in an article of window cleaners in Chicago, they talk about
mm,
and they talk about what they think when they're cleaning the windows and what kind of things they see over the windows when they're cleaning. So that things kind of
right.
things really just good details to remember. That also will let us know that people actually read the materials. But it's not right now. It sounds simple, but it's not that simple to
Mm.
find those details.
Oh, like for you to pick them out?
Yeah, especially
Yeah, I can.
because yeah.
Mhm. No, I just said I can imagine. Like, there's a lot of creativity in that, and
Yeah,
like pulling
yeah.
from information.
Yeah, and of course, the second language thing is something that it plays a role with me, because if the article is like a newspaper's article or thing like that, because I can do that. But if it's something more academic, like I need to put an effort, an extra effort, this is not in my own language. So yeah, it's tricky, but it's a really cool learning process that I have learned from Sam over the years.
Yeah, especially like thinking from the perspective of the student. I like that. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I'm also curious, like, just like outside of the classroom, there's so many, I feel like just on how I know you, it's like there's so many places that I could go and like ask you about. But I think for the audience, it would be cool for you to say like how, tell me which question you like. Okay. I'm thinking about either you talking about how you met Sam and Laurie, or what are some of the experiences that kind of directed you towards this work? Like experiences that you've had as you've grown up that like eventually led you to World in Conversation and like that type of passion. Because you did a lot of different things, right? You would like we're also in the corporate world too. I know we both relate on that. Um,
Yeah.
but do, do those two questions like make sense? Is there like a preference that you'd like to go down?
I think I can answer both questions. We can merge those questions like
Okay.
in for one answer, because they are kind of related.
Yeah.
So I met Sam and Lori in 2017 when they came to Colombia to give a conference
Hmm.
in a university from Colombia, and I had a friend, and she's like my childhood friend. Uh, I love her,
Uh,
and she was working like in press or communications in that university, and she knew that two sociologists will come to the university, and she said like, Julie is a sociologist. I don't know, I don't have idea what's a sociologist, so but Julie is a sociologist, so maybe she's interested in here and just listen to this conference. So she just,
uh-huh.
you know, and I arrived that day, and when I listened to them talking about dialogue, conflict, collaboration, and all the things that they were doing at that time in the university, and also
Hmm.
because Colombia was in a context of post peace agreement.
Say that
That
one more
was like
time.
Colombia was in a context of a post peace agreement. So
Okay. I f-
we
I
are,
feel like
uh, mm,
I feel like there's a lot to break down there too.
yeah.
Do you want to quickly like explain that and then go back to um the situation that Colombia was in? Put
Yeah, so do you
and
want me to explain first about Colombia?
yeah, yeah, just to give more insight into like why Sam and Laurie were there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Colombia, still, unfortunately, still, but at that time we had the oldest guerrilla in the continent, which was like FARC.
Guerrilla
The group,
warfare.
yeah, was
Okay.
FARC, FARC. That
FARC, FARC. Okay.
Mhm. That was the name of the oldest guerrilla in the continent, but that time, because now we have another one that is now
Really?
the, yeah, we have plenty, but maybe three groups, um, well,
And then
quote unquote, known.
could you
So
describe for like the people on the podcast like what gorilla means?
yeah, so
Yeah.
those are groups that they fight against the government because they find there's a lot of social injustice in the
Mm,
society, the country. So instead of, I mean, you can use different paths to go and solve things, but their way is to take arms and create
right.
groups to fight against the government, to change the social structure
Who
in a
who
country.
were who were these groups? Like, if you were to say, like, if you were to like put like a face to the name of like this guerrilla group, like who exactly were they? Not like
Like,
names, but
okay.
it,
Yeah,
like
like,
were they from like a certain demographic, or
yeah.
like what type of people were they?
Yeah, in that case, I mean, in the case of that group, they were primarily people from the countryside, like farmers. We call here campesinos,
Oh,
people in poverty, people who didn't have access to certain basic service from the states,
right.
and this is kind of the context of the creation of those groups. But before that, like many years ago, before that, I'm talking that they were created around like in the 60s, 70s. But
Oh, okay.
before, we had another issue, another long period of violence that we used to call here in Colombia the violence.
The
And that,
violence.
yeah, the
Oh, it was
violence.
just named the violence.
Yeah, the violence, and that
Wow.
was a period between political parties, liberals and conservatives, that
Hmm.
they were fighting against each other for the power of the country, but they were not just fighting like in the Congress or in elections or so, but that conflict went into the people. So
No
people
way.
in each other because you're liberal, I kill you. My friend is conservative and you're liberal, you kill them. Things like that. So that was really
Wow.
hard. Very, I can't find the word in English, but that was very,
That was just
uh,
awful, or are you trying to describe a word of like the terror, or
yes,
um,
yes, like awful.
just
I don't know.
horrendous, just horrible,
Yeah,
like,
horrendous,
uh,
insane, like crazy, like that the type
uh,
of crimes that they commit were like awful.
so
And
was
that,
this? Oh, go ahead. Yep.
so just saying that that violence kind of did an evolution to guerrillas, and
Mm,
yeah, and we haven't stopped that period actually right now. Even when the former president in 2017, 2016, I guess, they signed the peace agreement, like the guerrilla that I'm talking about, the FARC group signed a peace agreement with the government, so they stopped being a guerrilla group and they became a political party that has participation in the Congress, and they can be political
mm.
instead of being armed.
Oh, and
Uh,
that's the new one you were talking about.
yeah, that's they're now at this point FARC, the group FARC as a guerrilla, they don't exist anymore.
Right? And they've
They,
evolved into
they
this
evolved
other.
in a political party, and they're now like trying to be like inside the civil society. But we have
Mm.
another groups. We have other groups, guerrilla groups, that they haven't signed the peace agreement yet. So
Oh,
now we're dealing with this other group. Uh, it's a different group than FARC, and then we have another groups. We have groups participating in the drugs business,
right.
narco traffic in Colombia, from Mexico, from different. I mean, it's hard. It's difficult. It's a difficult situation in terms of uh, peace, or in terms
Right.
of public order, I guess.
Right. So it's like FARC eventually they integrated into like civil society, and then
Hmm.
they were like essentially no longer like a minority group. They were like any but then even tell me if I'm correct or not, but then as they became integrated, then more guerrilla groups were then created, almost creating the same exact situation, just just a new group.
Mm-hmm. The
Right.
kind of correct, but the other groups were not created after FARC. They were created at the same time or before FARC, but
Oh, wow.
didn't sign the peace agreement, because that peace agreement was only with the FARC group.
Oh, okay, so
And
FARC
all
was
of
the only group willing to compromise or willing to
yes,
come to some. Got
yes,
okay,
yes.
got it.
You know that it had happened over other armed conflicts in the world.
Hmm.
After they stop being a guerrilla, and they try to integrate themselves into the society, there's a lot of chaos, because most of them are assassinated. Most of them return to the former violent life. They join another groups or so. So it's not
Hmm.
something that you can say, okay, let's sign this paper and we are going to be a new person, a new society from now. It's a process that takes time. Unfortunately, it
Right.
takes people's lives as well. But most of them, I can say, because I know some of their uh, new businesses, some of them are trying
You know,
to.
uh-huh. You said you know some of the new businesses. Is that what you said?
Yeah, like they create enterprises, like they create new ways to earn life. Like uh, some of them
Wow.
have
Okay.
I don't know how to say that in English, like a craft beer company.
Oh, okay.
Uh,
Yeah, that makes sense.
Makes sense.
Hmm.
They have clothes, big businesses. They have arts, things, groups. I mean, they try to integrate themselves, not just to be recognized as a stereotype of person who was in the guerrilla, but someone who is a Colombian and is trying just to live their life in a decent way. So
Ah,
most of them are trying to create that, and I'm very happy to support their maybe the word is not businesses but entrepreneurships maybe.
yeah. Okay. So that's interesting. So, wait, are they? So this is interesting because I'm thinking. So these other guerrilla groups that aren't a part of FARC, you're saying have been creating their own enterprises and trying to integrate themselves into society despite like not having a peace agreement. But they're
No, the people
oh
who already signed and stop being part of the guerrilla FARC, the we call them
oh
reinsertados, but I don't like that word.
reinsertados.
Yeah, I don't like that works like you were reintegrated into society. Like they
Oh,
I
okay,
mean,
yeah.
you know, but I don't
So
like
say,
that
why not?
definition.
Yes, say more.
It feels like they were not part of Colombia and now they're part, but they were part. They were just part from the guerrilla perspective group. Some of them were forced to join the guerrilla. That was not their option. So I don't like to call them
Mm,
reinsertados as if they were
mm,
not part and then they join and now they're part. But this is how most of the policies and papers and programs and projects call them.
is
But
this like
I'm about them. The people who is having new entrepreneurships and new ways of lives, and so they are like former FARC guerrilleros.
interesting? So like is the way that you're describing it, it's making me wonder if it's similar to how in America we have like ex-convicts that have like a label over them that's like you're an ex-con, you're a
Yeah.
former felon, and then because of that label and past history, it's harder for them to integrate into society. Is that
Mhm.
kind of similar to these former FARC guerrilla members?
Yeah, I will say so. I will say so. I don't have a lot of contact with them as to know exactly what's going on with their lives right now, or
Right.
but my perception, and I used to work with people in displacement because of that violence long time ago when I started
Oh,
my
I
my
would love to hear
work.
about that. Mhm.
but I think I can say that this is pretty similar. You're right. Yeah, that's a good analogy
Oh, yeah.
to make
Comparison. Yep. Analogy comparison. Yep.
uh,
Hmm.
to help the audience to understand what's what's what look what, how it looked like to be ex guerrilla person.
Yeah. That's so
I guess
interesting. And so you used to work directly with them before, like um
long time ago. Yeah,
uh how, what did
long.
you long time ago? How long we talking?
20 years maybe. No,
Okay.
less than 20 years, but around.
This is early sociologist, Julie.
Hmm. It's because I'm not young, but I'm old, so I now have 20 years of experience.
Nah, you're not old. What are you talking about? That's
Yes, I am.
cool. So what did no you're not. What did you do when when you were working with them? What did you
Mhm. Yeah, I worked for NGO who had social projects and economical financial projects for people who were displaced by the armed conflict. So some of them were maybe part of the guerrilla, some of them were part of other groups. We call them paramilitares, which is like
Mhm.
paramilitary. Um, some of them were victims just because they were in the middle of a battle and their family were killed or they lost everything, like their home, their animals, their land. So
Wow.
most of them, they moved themselves to the big cities to try to find first like a safe place to stay and second like a new life, like they couldn't live anymore in the countryside because there was like this big war happening there, so
Right.
kind of refugees but inside the same country.
Wow. Kind of like what?
Refugees but
Oh, right.
inside the same country, like they were
Oh,
not
so they
for
were seeking
asylum.
asylum and
Mm,
like
no,
within the same country, kind of. Or
yeah,
no?
yeah. Mm, maybe not in the formal way of seeking an asylum, like they didn't
More
need,
informal.
yeah, they didn't need to ask or to fill out the paper to live in Bogota, for example, if they were living in the countryside, but not in the formal way. But in the
Right.
practice uh, works like
And
that, being a
and
refugee in.
because that makes sense, and because of like I'm sure like the huge population that was moving from the countryside to Bogota, there was like this huge, which is I'm assuming that's why that was the role you had, because there was like this huge reorganization of people,
Mhm.
or
Yep.
like which became a whole process in itself. Just like
Yeah.
spur of the moment, like in a way, right? Like this is like, oh, this is happening. Now we have a bunch of people we need to find homes.
Yeah. I was in charge of like working with them like in the settlement in the new neighborhoods that they were trying to have life. So
Mhm.
I tried to connect them. I was like a bridge between the institutions, the local and the government institutions, and the people in displacement. So I was in charge of finding them like a school for their kids, trying to help
Wow.
create a new business,
Wow.
trying to give them access to healthcare, uh, and
Wow.
yeah, and one of the most beautiful projects I have ever worked aside WinC
Yeah.
was was teaching elder population how to write and learn because they were illiterates at that time. So I was in
That's
charge of that.
amazing work.
Yeah, that was so beautiful. They needed to open a bank account and they couldn't because they didn't know how to make a signature. So we realized that that was a need and we created a group and we taught them how to write and read so they can access to a bus station to a bank account, to the medical service, because in the countryside you don't need to fill out any paper. The doctor is
Right.
just a farm, and so or you can go to the local hospital, but they know you. They know you for your entire life, so that you don't need to fill out your name, surname, anything like that, because
Wow.
they know you. But in the
Wow.
cities, are different. So yeah,
So,
I was
so
in
they're
charge of
literally
that.
wow, wow. That is beautiful. And it's like it's making like you're really helping me see like these people were literally just completely uprooted and had to have like relearn a whole new process. Like they knew
Yeah,
they're a doctor. They didn't have to fill out slips to go see a doctor or now they have to do all these things because they've
yeah,
been uprooted into the city. Wow.
yeah.
It makes me wonder, do you have, I know it was a while back, but it makes me wonder if you have any memories of like of a specific like family you worked with that like just has been carried with you throughout
Yeah,
your time.
um, I mean, a lot, like good ones and not so good ones as well, because of the environment of violence that was surrounded by everything.
Of
But
course.
one of the good ones was like just receiving their love every time you arrive to their homes, because we didn't have like a classroom. We worked in their houses,
So you're like a
and
social worker almost, you know?
yeah, yeah. That was pretty much my role.
Yeah,
And
wow.
um, just receiving the love and receiving their the way they host you in their home, despite of having literally nothing to share with you,
Mm.
in I mean in terms of food or coffee or whatever, that when someone arrives to your home, you want to bring them what you have,
Mhm.
and having meals with them, having breakfast with them, eating what they were eating, and discovering new foods that I wouldn't discover that in other parts of the country, because I had never traveled in that parts of Colombia, but I tried those new foods in their homes, having breakfast with fish and cheese, or things like I was not my regular routine, but discovering that and tasting that and knowing that new culture that I was learning, in social poverty conditions, but still people were very generous and sharing things. That's one thing that I sometimes I remember with the warmth of my heart.
Wow, that's so heartfelt. This is
Yeah,
touching.
yeah.
And
And people, like those individuals, like I remember their names. I still remember their names, and sometimes I'm very sure they're not living. I mean, they're
right,
past anymore.
right.
Yeah, they're past, because they were very very old. Like I'm talking about people from 80 years old,
Oh,
79 years old, things like that.
wow, that is so sweet.
Yeah.
And they still live on through you.
Yeah, I love them. I still remember them. I love them. Seeing them as children, trying to learn how to write mom, how to write dad, how to write things like that. Like letters start to have to make sense to them, and
Wow,
seeing their expression like, oh, that's my name. Wow, so I can write this. So, oh, I can make this
wow.
sign to my restaurant that I'm trying to open, or things like that. That's really nice. Really, like you feel like, okay, I did something good for the world.
Yeah, yeah. Like you literally gave them skills to better themselves and to like for survival. Like,
Yeah.
wow. So I didn't even know that. It was the conditions were so bad that they actually for 70 years, 80 years didn't know how to write
Hmm.
or wow.
That's insane, isn't it? Like you cannot imagine someone like I wonder if in the United States there is like so much illiteracy. How do you say
Yeah,
that?
that's perfect. You did it.
Is there a
Yep.
lot? in the United States?
Oh,
You like
I'm actually,
illiteracy?
I'm not sure, to be honest. I don't, maybe, Jeff, do you have any idea? Because I'm not, I'm curious now. I wonder if we can look it up.
Are you asking about illiteracy in the United States?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's ask the Google.
Well, to be honest, and to be fair with my country, this is something very common, like 15 or 20 years ago. Like, I'm very sure that right now, those rates for sure are pretty lower. But at that time, with the violence and the context that we were talking about, that was like something common for elder people.
Wow. Wow. And so most of the, like, for people that like that, were most of their jobs like work, like farming jobs or like labor jobs,
Yes.
like in the countryside? Okay.
Yes. Mm.
Got it. And so it's like once they move into the city, it's like now what jobs do they have like do since they're
Yeah.
like skilled in a certain area?
Yeah, they most of them couldn't access to any job because nobody was hiring someone from 70 years old. Because even if they were
Right.
so skilled to work in the field, in the farm or so, so in the city you don't need that. So uh, that was a shame because some of them were very depressed because they wanted to be useful or helpful. Maybe that's the
Right.
word
Right.
wouldn't because they nobody will hire them. So having the
Wow.
sense of they're losing their time uh, at home just watching TV or doing nothing was something very very hard for people who is just their
Yeah.
life is
Their
farm.
whole life they've been right. They've been like in a sense like independent, like creating their
Hmm.
own food, like farming their own food and like, wow. So was this a social assistance? Like if did they already have like did because they were impoverished, they probably didn't have a lot of money. So like when they were moved to the city, were they assisted by or like were you the assistance pretty much, the only kind of assistance and or did they receive money somehow or if they weren't able to work?
Um, some of them received what is in English subsidies, like subsidies, maybe.
Okay.
I don't know. Like
I
yeah,
think
the government gives you like a amount of money,
for the difference, yeah.
but it's never
So
enough. It's never
I
enough because it's just
mm,
a little. It's just a little, like very little. So no, it's not like how do you say that?
like uh like a complete social
Welfare?
welfare, like where
Yeah.
they're
No, it was not like that, and it's still not like that right now nowadays. So it's
wow.
just like a portion. Like if you live your life, let's say like I don't know, let's put just a number just as an example. If you need like $1,000 per month, like the government will give you maybe 300 or something like that. So
Wow.
it's
So that's like nothing.
no, it's yeah. To be honest, is nothing. So that's why NGOs like the one I was working for, we tried to connect them with different services and different other entities that they can access things or so. So we have I think it's soap kitchen. We call that in English. Like
Oh, okay.
it's a place where people cook a lot of meals and other people can go and receive lunch or maybe dinner
A
for
Right.
soup
free.
kitchen.
Soup kitchen. Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Soup kitchen.
Um,
Wow.
and
Wow.
I think one of the biggest things was trying to help them to create their own business or their own entrepreneurship. Oh my, that word is so hard
Yeah.
to pronounce. Sorry.
On- No, you got it. I got it. Entrepreneurship. It's a tongue
Wow.
twister.
That's
It's okay. Give me
level
give me
10.
a Spanish word. Give me a Spanish word and watch me mess it up.
Okay, emprendimiento.
Yeah.
Emprendimiento.
Entretenimiento. Can't do it. Entendimiento. No.
Yeah, I feel good now. Thank you.
Yeah, I got you. I got you. Jeff, your turn. No. Um, I think so. Wow, that it really illuminates to me like the importance, just like, and for one, it's like cool to hear, 'cause, you know, like World in Conversation is like grassroots sociology, and like you were literally doing grassroots work, you know, like
Yeah.
on the ground with the people. So I'm already seeing like one of the parallels as to like what brought you to World in Conversation through, you know, the spark was like there already, like it was on fire already, way before you joined World in Conversation, it sounds like. And
Yeah.
what I'm
Makes
curious,
sense.
what when you were growing up, like how what was your parents like relationship to like this, um like where were they positioned, like, you know, as they were growing up, or like when you were growing up around this uh this warfare, you know, or like this social inequity, or
Mm, mm,
if that makes
I
sense.
haven't.
If
Yeah, yeah. Uh, so maybe you're asking me about how do I learn about
or
social
oh,
inequity
actually,
or
actually, the like, what was that like? How was your like, was your family impacted, or like, were you impacted, or like, how was your like your surrounding community impacted? Is that maybe a better question?
yeah, yeah.
Or like,
So
was your yeah?
I will try to answer and you let me know if that's what you're asking.
Okay, love it.
So I guess we had we never received welfare from the state when I was little,
Hmm.
but my mom comes from a very poor family, uh, and my father comes from a family from excuse me, from the countryside.
Oh wow,
Um,
okay.
they
So both of them were like pretty impoverished, like the countryside, and then just your mom's side was just also kind of impoverished. But when you say
in
countryside, I immediately assume that they were in poverty when you say countryside.
yeah, well, maybe they were not that in comparison with the urban life. I think
Mm.
my dad's family can be named as impoverished, but in their own context, in the village where they live, they were kind of the random middle class family because they have everything they need. They have access to food. They farm their own food. Um, they had a property, so they were
Mm.
owners of the house. They even rent a part of the house to other families. So they
So
were like living
Mhm.
decent
your
life
da-
in that village.
okay, so your dad was a little bit more well off growing up, in a way, in comparison to your mom.
In comparison to my mom, yeah, because
Got it.
my grandpa from my dad's side, he had a job, and my grandma was a housewife, and her job was taking care of the family and the farm and the chickens and everything that they had.
Hmm.
But my grandpa didn't want my dad to stay in that village. He want their children, his children, to study in the university in Bogota and had like a different life rather than the farm.
Oh, okay.
So that's why dad went to Bogota, and they met, my parents met in that neighborhood where they were living. But when my dad went to Bogota, he went to live in a, not really, it's not the poorest neighborhood, but you can say like maybe
Like lower class, like
lower
lower.
class, lower
Got it.
class.
Hmm.
So my dad experienced that new urban life in different conditions. Like in his village, he had access to everything. In the city, he hadn't. He needed to find a job and study and have a job at the same time, and so. And from
Wow.
my mom's side, some of them, uh, I can say exactly like the story or so, but I know that sometimes my grandma like the mother of my mother, she
Hmm.
received welfare subsidies things because they were 9 children. That's another thing.
Wow,
So
really?
yeah, yeah. So yeah, that's kind of the thing. Like maybe connects me with social injustice and maybe with that part of our country that not many people experience. I mean, there's a lot more people in poverty and with difficult to access to resources than wealthy people and people with means. But
Right.
the story of the lack of access is not usually well known for the wealthy people or the people who have means. Like sometimes people assume that everyone has the same conditions and there's a lot to know more about the country, but it's
Really?
not.
Wait, so it's that there's that much like lack of knowledge about other communities or like in Colombia, like the wealthy aren't aware of these like
Yeah,
to a certain
yeah,
extent.
I perceive that. I perceive that. And you know what? I'm going. It's not like the best example, but I think it helps. Uh,
Yeah.
right now, living in a small city nearby, not nearby, but like 20 minutes flying from
Hmm.
Bogota, but it's a small
Yeah.
city with Armenia. And uh, how do I say that? With the incomes that I have right now, I can live in Bogota. I mean, my household, my husband and I, we can
Hmm.
live in Bogota like in a middle high class, let's say, like just
Nice.
just to put a place in our minds,
Right.
and we can live a really good life, decent life, or so. But with those incomes here in Armenia, we're kind of wealthy people because this city is smallest. You don't have many things to spend like in Bogota. You don't have a lot of malls. You don't have. I mean, there's a difference in the way of life. So here
Hmm.
you can live with less or with the same that you live in a big city. You can live like in a improved way, let's say. So I'm
Hmm.
living in a neighborhood which I don't fit.
Oh, we say.
'Cause- which I don't fit at all because I'm surrounded from people who is member from the golf club. um they have
Oh.
by car, and they pretend with you about their travels, things like that, their clothes and
Mm.
so. So right now I'm just realizing that there's a lack of information about how common, regular, random most of the country lives outside wealthy bubble
Right.
or that group.
S-
I
So
don't
what
blame
I
them. They know, but it's a reality.
yeah, that's cool. Like I hear you saying that. You're like, I don't blame them, but you do see them like acting within their privilege and only seeing like essentially their privilege or um it's okay. Is that kind of what you're saying? Like they're just, living in their privilege and
Yeah, it's just to put you an example uh to answer that question about like certain people not knowing how the most of the majority of the country lives. Like
right.
there's a lot of people struggling uh about I mean struggling because they don't have like a stable job, or they need to do this during the day and or have 3 or 4 jobs just to feed their families, or access to education is not like yeah, it's not easy. And if they access to that education, they don't have the connections to get a job.
Right.
So hard for them like to know that they graduated from college, let's say, or the university, and they don't have access to a decent paid job, uh, because those jobs are just in the hands of other people who already have the access to that. I mean, you know what I
Ah,
mean in terms
yeah,
of that.
no. Uh-huh. And wait, were you also saying? Oh, go ahead.
No, just saying that I think that sometimes one part of the country doesn't know what happens in the other part, and now that I'm living in this place, I'm feeling like I'm living in a place, nice place, by the way, like beautiful in terms of landscapes and birds, trees
Yeah.
and swimming pool and so. But in terms of relationships with the people who lives here, it gives me like a pain sometimes
Mm.
to create that relationship. If it feels like we are talking about different things every time, like different worlds, like different countries.
Yeah, right, right. You're on to the the place that you're at in terms of like yeah, you guys are just like on different uh I don't want to say interests, just like like levels of awareness about things. I'm starting to think,
Yeah.
or um
We
eh,
could say to in honor of our job, we could say positions, perspectives,
yeah, right.
but
Yep.
because I'm not facilitating anything here, I'm just living, I'm a citizen, I'm a neighbor with my other neighbors. It's just sometimes hard to create a connection. Uh, we need a facilitator, Laya. You want to
Yeah.
come?
Right. Yeah, let me come through. Let me come through. I would love to
Yeah,
come to Colombia. Wow.
please, please. Open invite.
Oh, that'd be awesome. Man, it'd be so cool. But yeah, that is really fascinating. I kind of relate a little bit. For me,
I'll go.
just when I was, because when I lived with my mom, it was, I lived with my mom. She was a single mom, and like she would be like working two jobs, and would like have food stamps, and and like live that kind of like, and then she would like struggle to pay rent, and I would always like witness that when I was a kid growing up.
Mm-hmm.
And I just remember like being around, and like I remember being in high school, and then I kind of had to like my friends weren't a part of like the wealthy group,
Mm-hmm.
or and then like my dad, like, I would see my dad every so often, and he started to do well for himself, so he started to live in like communities that had just more wealth.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and when I was younger, I actually like made a kind of a negative association. I felt like the kids that I would talk to that came from, maybe a little bit more wealth, or, you know, uh, I felt like they weren't like some of like I associated some of them with bullying,
Mm,
like,
okay.
or as a kid, like I don't think that anymore, but like as a kid, I was starting to make those associations, and I just felt
Mm-hmm.
like I didn't fit in, or I couldn't relate or communicate with uh with kids that came from like a certain like socioeconomic status or something.
Mm-hmm.
Um so yeah, I just it's crazy how much of a divide like it feels like it can create. um
Yeah.
I just relate with that. So
Yeah.
this is cool. So this is like the whole, what did you do after this, like once you stopped working for like the NGOs? what
Mm-hmm.
was your um what was your next step? And I noticed it's 4:04. Jeff, are we probably going to go into like what, 4:30, I'm thinking, just so I know like where to go with like where I'm directing the
The conversation, yeah.
combo.
4:30 is usually when we try to head out of here, so around then is fine.
Okay,
See,
perfect.
Julie, you thought we would only be here for like 10 minutes.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's good. I support. Like, okay, okay. I feel like I'm
Yeah,
just.
time is flying. Like I didn't even realize it was 4:04. That's crazy. Um, but what did you do after you so all of this had like you had those deep experiences, and you've had that deep, you had a very um like a connection with underrepresented groups, just because of like your family when you grew up, or like, and with your mom, and like what she went through, you said. that you're really connected to that piece of the community that's like underrepresented, and then
Yeah.
also being involved with the NGOs, that kind of like sounds like it's another building block of like the fire that was already there that was like originated as a child, I guess. And
Mm-hmm.
then from there, is that when you moved into like university or like the corporate world, or and then that's where you met Sam and Laurie, or um, I guess we can kind of loop back into the yeah, like what did you do? What did you do after the NGOs? Or like,
Yeah.
what,
So
were you already in university at that time, or like graduated from university, or?
I was already graduated. I joined the university after high school immediately. I finished. Here in Colombia, we don't do college and then undergraduate. We do right there university. So I did 5 years of university and studied sociology. When I graduated, I started working in that NGO, and
Hmm.
I think it was like for 4 years or so. And I wanted to have a better job, better paid, and I wanted to move, like getting more experience and also getting like a promotion or so. And I
Right.
realized I needed to learn how to speak English, because everything that I was looking for in the international cooperation or things like that, like social projects, like development, things like that, and needed you to speak English. And I had a good level of English from my high school,
Okay.
but not enough to work in an English environment, or at least to be able to have a conversation or so. So
Hmm.
I worked very hard. I save every peso colombiano that I could.
Yep.
I traveled to Australia, and after the NGO, I stayed like 1 year in Australia. I
What?
Surprisingly, I learned English there.
No way. In Australia.
Yeah.
That's so
Um,
cool. Okay.
yeah, that was a really nice experience for me. And when I came back to Colombia, I was under the assumption that because I was speaking English fluently and so and so and so, every NGO in the country will just like fight for me.
Yeah.
Which never happened.
Right. Right. They're like, we want Julie. Yeah.
Yeah, because she speaks English. Yeah,
Right.
so no, it never happened, but life is life. So I ended up working in a corporation as the executive director of a foundation. That
Mm.
this big corporation have different. It was a holding. They had different units of businesses like construction, hotels, things like that, and they also they also have the foundation that was in charge of social projects for communities around them, like pretty much like corporate social responsibility.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
I was like asking to myself, like, what the hell I'm doing here? Like, I don't want to do that. I want to go to the grassroots again. I want to work like this. But that
Mm.
was the job
What
I had at the
what was
moment.
like what was missing? Because like you were kind of in the same, like technically you were like you were kind of in the same like field work of like, working with like the community in what was different though, like being on the ground versus like working in the corporations, even though that the focus was still like the community, but what was different about like being with a corporation and doing that versus like when you were with an NGO?
That's a really, really cool question, Olaya. I think I have never thought about it. And now that you're asking that, I'm thinking that the difference was me, like my role. Like
Mm.
in the NGO, I could be kind of part of the community and working with them and just like living, like doing a lot of ethnography with them and just sharing, fighting. Uh, I mean, fighting their cause. I don't know if that's a good. term in
Oh,
English, but
they're fighting their, what was the last word you used? Their what?
they're cows, like they're
They're, wait,
fighting their fight. Let's say, like
fighting their
I was,
fight. Yeah, yeah. Oh, fighting
yeah,
their cause. Their cause. Is that what you said? Cause?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, fighting their fight. Yeah, 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 fighting their cause. Like you're like you're a soldier with them. You
yes,
know.
exactly. Perfect definition. Yeah, like shoulder to shoulder. Like, yes, we're doing this, we're organizing this. In the corporate world, I was the one who was like just directing, and I was the one who was deciding budget. I was the one. I mean, I was not the one because I have a board like over me,
Hmm.
but I was the head of everything, and I was experiencing the other side. Like in the NGO, I was just asking, like, give us, we need this, we need that, da 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 da. And then
Yeah.
being in the corporate world was like, I can do that because I also need to save money for this, and I so that was like
Mm.
different perspective, and I learned also how that structural part, administrative part, managing part, like money part works. So
Right.
that
So,
was hard for me to adapt, but I adapted very well.
yeah. Yeah. What was so if I'm like hearing you correctly, you know, the difference in, well, what opened your eyes was that like when you were at the NGOs working shoulder to shoulder with the people, you were like, this is what we need, this is what we need, you know, and then you're working in a corporate role and you realize like, oh, like I can't actually give everything to this specific
Mhm.
thing because there's so many more limitations that I wasn't aware of before, like
Yeah, yeah,
budget and, you know, you have
yeah,
to address the board and see if it's okay with the board.
yeah,
So there were so many more obstacles that you realized, like when you're in the
yeah,
corporate
yeah,
world, and it like
yeah.
made
That I
you feel more limited, like because
yeah,
you're,
yeah, 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 yeah. Totally, totally,
got
totally.
it.
And
Wow.
and I think
But
it
you
was good.
adapted. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was good for me to learn because everything happens in your life for some reason, and you learn even if it's a good or a bad thing. I know that sounds like an Instagram post, but it is.
It's
It's
a
how it
great
is.
caption.
Yeah, it's what it is. You're
Yeah.
learning. Even inside the hole, you're learning. But
Yeah.
but I guess like the skills about managing stuff, I learned them from that corporate life, because then after that foundation I was working for another company, and then I was like a consultant for companies in social responsibility, okay, in corporate social
Wow.
responsibility, and I was writing annual reports for companies with the scope of the sustainability
Yeah.
index, like that. So I learned a lot, and I think part of the skills that I have right now to manage the class, I'm pretty sure I got them from that time, knowing how an organization works and how is the scenario when you don't have a lot of resources, but you need to be very, very, I don't want to use the word productive, but you have to be efficient.
Mm. Yeah.
And and you need to
And,
meet everybody's needs, not just one group needs. And you have
mm.
to do a lot of things.
Like you got to be flexible and you have to pivot and
Yeah,
you have to be creative in the moment, like with the little
yeah,
resources you have,
yeah, yeah. And
right?
still, you can be you can be rebel still. You can be still going against the thing that you feel that is not correct. Like in that corporation, that first corporation I worked when I arrived from when I came from Australia.
Mhm.
Their projects, their initial projects were giving the communities like TVs, microwaves, things, because the organization was thinking that the community that they wanted to serve needed TVs,
Right.
radio, and,
Like
I don't know.
leisure, they need leisure is what is
Uh-huh.
what they were arguing.
Yeah, and I was like, how about to give them the opportunity to finish high school. And they said
That's
like,
awesome.
no, because we are not doing that. We are not an institution of education. So you're not, the board was like, no, no, no. And, but I did it.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, I did it.
That's
And
right. That's
of my time working with them, we had
uh-huh.
a huge project of people who work in the construction business finishing their high school. And we have a project of small libraries in communities, in poor communities in Bogota. So
That's awesome.
that's
And this is
cool.
when you
That
were
was,
working for the foundation.
yeah, yeah. Because I had
Wow.
money. I had money, just that I couldn't, yeah, I couldn't spend that money in the way I wanted. So I had to be creative to meet my goal without being so against the board. But at the end,
Yeah.
we
How,
did it. We did it. So that was cool.
do you remember how you were creative? Do you remember what you did at that time?
Cry in my eyes.
You're like, I used my charm and like the you were like you fought for them, you cried for them. They're like, I saw. It's
Oh,
funny.
I cried at home, but when I had
Oh,
to,
okay. I thought it was like a I thought it was like a performance. Like you're like in front of the board.
I could, to be honest, I could, but no, no, I didn't. I was,
Right.
no, I was, I think it was like 6 months trying to convince them to show them the importance of not the importance, but the difference between having a microwave and having a certificate that allows you to find a better job or allows you to understand that education is important, so you will give your children education. So
Yeah,
6 months trying to convince them, doing research, talking with people, presenting the proposal
that's
in
awesome.
the meeting, and they say no, and then coming back again. I remember one of the meetings they said like, "We are okay. Stop. Are you trying to create an union here in this conference? Just be honest. You want to?" They were
No
like,
way.
no, I could, if you keep pushing me in the corner, I will. No, I
You're
didn't.
badass.
Yeah, I was trying. I had to say like, no, no, I'm not trying to do that, but you can just like have social mobility if you just have things instead of having opportunities. And I remember one
Yeah,
of the directors of the construction area in one day in a lunch, in just like in a workmate's lunch. I was
right.
asking, what would you do if your workers mm, were able to read your instructions better rather than you yelling them every time? And he was like,
Right.
no, it will be great. La, 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 la. So I told him my project and I asked him to go with me with the next meeting of the board and explain them that that will be something that will help his daily work. So when they
Wow.
saw like that was something impacting the business instead of being nice with people, I
Right.
think are changing their
Mm.
mind, and finally we create that project, and it was beautiful. It was beautiful seeing people graduating from school
That was
at the age of 60, 70 years old.
no way. That is such a cool story. The way that you pivoted and like is that like a normal job responsibility to like go out to the sites to talk to the workers? Because that's to me that sounds like that was so creative, so smart to be like, you know what? Let me show them how it's impacting the people that work for us, and that work for this company. And wow, that's to create
Yeah,
change that way. That's an awesome job. Did you?
cool.
Wow. So that must have been a super fulfilling moment to be able to.
Yeah, yeah, now, now it is, but during the process, like every process, you hate the process
Right.
because you're,
Yeah.
"Hey, I'm leaving this. These people doesn't understand. Blah, 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 blah." So it
Right.
was. I think I also received good advices from people around me, and yeah, I was suffering, to be honest, but at the end,
Wow.
it was okay. Now it feels fulfillment, fulfilling,
Yeah. Right. I'm
as you.
glad you feel like that now,
Yeah,
because
now,
hearing that story, right, at the time was agonizing, you're saying.
of course.
Yeah. Uh-huh. That is so cool.
I was younger, so I was also taking things very personal,
Right.
like feeling like, no, this is unfair. I need to change it
Yeah.
now.
The
So
activist. Yeah.
activist
Hmm.
inside.
Yep.
Right
Uh-huh.
now, bit more relaxed with with things. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Like the inside is like blue moon, Julie.
Oh yeah, life is a blue moon.
Yeah. That is so cool to hear the journey of like how you got. So like from there is when you kind of started to what was it like after your corporate job that you met Laurie and Sam?
Yeah, many years happened after that, and I joined another companies. And as I told you, I was a consultant for
Consultant.
corporate social responsibility. I wrote reports, so like many years. Finally, like in 2017, I attend this conference, and after that, I was something just clicked on my brain. Because one thing that I haven't mentioned is like, and you realize it when I told you about my first job. I was
Hmm.
never been. I had. I had. Oh, I don't know how to say that grammarly
Oh yeah,
correctly.
go try. We got this.
Been
Well,
able
well,
to let my organizations or my jobs or my surroundings. I don't know, my context, that I was a
hmm.
sociologist, because people was like, "What's your profession?" Sociologist. Ah, this is like psychology. And I ended up many years saying like, yeah, 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 like a psychologist. If they say like a social worker, yeah, yeah, same, same. I was like not
Mm.
willing to make clarification of anything.
Because they
Because
already
people,
had their own interpretation
yeah,
or
or not, or
nothing.
any interpretation, like sociologist. That sounds guerrilla maybe or so, but I don't know. So I was very
Right.
afraid to be open and saying like, I'm a sociologist. And when I was
Oh,
in that
because like did that have like a
conference,
negative connotation, like a
yeah,
sociologist?
it is. It has right now. I mean, it's still. I mean, still is what
Mm.
I
Like
wanted to say.
what's the connotation that it's like not a good job or like that it's
Like
not
left wing, um, like guerrilla,
uh
like rebel, like, which is a little bit true. But
yeah,
it's
right.
maybe rebel
Mm.
thing, but it's, you say,
Nonconformist.
yeah, non-conforming, like everything is speaking out, like things like that. So I was hiding
Uh,
a little bit that I was a sociologist. But when
ah.
I got connected with Word Conversation, Sam and Lori, and I start discovering all of this work, I was like coming out of the closet as a sociologist.
So
I'm a
you're like
sociologist. And so,
reveal yourself, right? Wow.
yeah,
Okay,
that's
so
why I appreciate so much this work, because it let me be what I wanted to be in my brain, and let me think about the things I wanted to think, work with that, being paid for that.
yeah,
um,
without people thinking that you're going too left field or like too right field, like because all the things
yeah,
that you're thinking about, are like in your head they're aligned, but to the companies that you're working for, like it's like, oh, that's not a part of what your role is, or like don't think that like you need to be over here mentally, or um got it.
yeah,
So you were able to be more free in your interests and the
yeah,
questions that you had, and um got it. Okay. Did
yeah.
did you start to? Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead. Ask the
Oh,
question.
I was just gonna ask. I was gonna jump somewhere and like because for some reason I remember, I think either you saying or Laurie saying before that eventually you started to hold dialogues for like people in the community with Wink, or if that was, or you wanted to do that, or if that was.
Yeah, yeah, some sort of that. Like when we met them, my friend and I, we realized that we wanted to be trained as facilitators.
Mm-hmm.
So, and because of the context of the country, we felt that that was a really nice tool to have dialogues between people who was against the peace agreement, because we had a lot of people against the peace agreement, but we have also people in favor of the peace agreement. So we have like two sides, let's say. And that
Ah,
time we said like it would be nice just to have dialogues and talk more and just try to get people just close in their ideas or perspectives or so.
mm-hmm.
And so we received we called, no, yeah, we called like 12 people maybe, and we had a small training in basics of facilitation, but very different from the thing that we now know as training of
Right,
facilitation. Was
right.
the thing we're just working and navigating in world in conversation at that time. And
Mm-hmm.
after that, I had a job, but I was volunteering, trying to create spaces to have dialogues here. So I knock many doors from different organizations, trying to let them know this tool, and maybe having projects where they need our services as facilitators, and yeah, just trying to have
Whoa.
proposals and projects or so. But that was very hard. That was like 2 years doing that, and it didn't
Working
work
for
like that.
Wink?
Yeah, for WinC. I was every time like Sam and Lori traveled to Colombia, I tried, and my friend at that time, we tried to have to make appointments with them and organizations and explain them like finding resources, fundraising, but more in the sense of projects, not donations, but projects. Um,
Right. Like kind of like the red blue dialogues that we're about to
yeah,
have?
exactly like that with different organizations here in Colombia. But it didn't work. It didn't work like that because people was like, so do I have to pay for people having a dialogue? Okay. So most of
Mm,
them
because
were excited, but they didn't have the money. Many things. So
right.
after that, we decided to create this initiative here, Colombia se escucha, and it
Ah,
was
so
this.
that's the transition point. You were like working with the community, you were realizing that it was hard for some people to like get involved because of, they don't have the money. So that's when you pivoted to the university that you graduated from, or just a university that
Yeah,
you had relations with.
yeah, I graduated from that university, and
Got
we
it.
just realized that maybe it would be better to reply the model from Penn State, like having students in conversations instead of
Right.
keep themselves looking for money and grants or projects or development opportunities with dialogues itself. So
Right.
we started that, and the first university that joined it was La Universidad del Rosario. I am an alumni from there, and
Hmm.
that was successful. And yeah, this is now until now. Like we started, I think it was like in 2029, if I'm not wrong, and
2000
we have
what? 2000.
19. I think I
Okay.
was about
Hmm.
creo in Spanish. I think uh
Hmm.
19, 2019 or 2020. No, 19. Maybe it's 19.
Okay.
And yeah, and we started this initiative here. My friend is not longer connected at all with the initiative because she's involved in other work from her field.
Hmm.
But because I also started working with WinC in 2020, I think I just took the lead and keep Colombia's Escucha alive with the students coming from this university, and we had also another university which is like more like a country. It's not local. It's more like country university. I don't know how to say that. Like, oh my god,
Oh, okay. Oh, it's like it's not like
national.
oh, okay. It's a national university
Yeah,
for
it's not located only in Bogota. It has also branches in different.
oh, just like Penn State,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
like how they have branch campuses throughout Pennsylvania.
Yeah. So they have it
Got it.
around Colombia, and this is Uniminuto, and yeah, and this is right now like. I mean, right now it's like the combination, and the other job that we didn't talk about, but you know a lot is the training
Yeah.
that we
Of
live
which
together.
which you started that in what 2020? Is that you 2022 you started training or 2023 or 2020?
Yes, maybe 22. I
Okay.
think it's maybe sounds like it was in another life,
Yeah,
like long
right.
time ago. But
Even though
yeah,
it was like so recent. It's crazy. It does feel like that though. Yeah.
I'm just
And
working with
and
119. Like,
what was that like to and I know it's at 4:31, so maybe I can like ask you one more question and uh just like if you wanted to speak to the training aspect at all, of just what was that like for you? Like going that's so like first of all, it's just like from this whole conversation, it's so cool to see like to me it's like wow, you're a trailblazer. Like all that fire from like knocking on doors, like you were going door to door, knocking on people like, hey, let's have a dialogue. You know, working with the community. It's like seeing the pain and suffering that's in your community and like working to help and then and like all the places that you like served and had impact is so like I of course because we've talked I've known a little bit about your story but of course not to this extent and it's so cool to see like how the fire showed up in every single place that you served in and then how it blossomed into like this beautiful thing of like creating a program at Colombia Segucha is I'm probably butchering that. Um, but that's so cool, Julie,
oh,
to see
thank
all that.
you.
And then and then to then train too. It's like went from all this to trainer to, it's like wow, like a whole evolution. Or just I don't know, or growth, or just like what or stepping into what you always were, or I don't know. But that's
Uh,
awesome.
yeah. I guess my training, I can define my training experience. I mean, being a trainer, it was
Yeah.
actually my training as a facilitator. I guess like I was a trainer, but I was trained to be a facilitator in that period of time. Like
Wow.
if you
Go
I
ahead.
will say I was trained before. I received a lot of orientation, guidance, and I think I was able to facilitate and so. But I can say right now that after being a trainer is when I can feel like I'm a facilitator.
Uh-huh. Like once you got that, now you're like the stamp is on. You're stamped now. Like Julie, a facilitator. After that.
Yeah, I feel right now I feel myself like I can say like I'm a facilitator, but just because I was a trainer. I was needing that experience because I never received a training like our students receive right now, like three
Right.
semester or things like that. I was not a Penn State student, so I didn't have any connection with word and conversation as a student. So
Yeah.
I
Which
think my biggest
mhm.
experience as a trainer was that becoming a facilitator and understanding more of what does it mean to intervene groups, understanding things about groups, and yeah,
Right.
like doing.
That's so cool. Like what that shows me, because like I never knew that. Like I know you mentioned it, like when we were working together as trainers, but I never would have thought that like that you weren't trained, to be a facilitator the
Yeah,
whole
I
time. Which
received a trainer that I mentioned it before in 2017 with the
Mhm.
foundations. It was like 12 hours or I can't remember, or 20 hours,
which is
but
so
it was
little.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And it was different. It was different. So
Wow.
from now,
It
like being in the core of the thing as a trainer just gave me the opportunity to understand more the meaning of a facilitator. And I'm pretty sure right now that you guys have evolved things a lot. Uh I may need to learn more again and understand more and so, but at least the basics, I think I got it from that.
Yeah, yeah, and that's so. This is this like conversation. You know how Lori says bridge people. Well, this is like really helping me see like how she sees like whoa, like they're like looking for bridge people. Like when Lori was like, oh, we need to have you because like she could see that you were a bridge person because you had all of the internal attributes. Of like of what a facilitator is. Like the fire to take risk, like
Mm-hmm.
bridging people together, seeing the different perspectives that people are going through. And like all of those, she's like saw that was like in you, and that I'm really seeing like, wow, like bridge people, like World in Conversation really has true bridge people. That's awesome. Wow. Yeah. I feel like I learned so much.
Oh no, I'm also learned about many. I mean, not learned, but no, it's not learn the word. It's like just think about things I haven't
that ha-
think in
and
a
about
while.
along, yeah, right. Yeah, like
Thank you for
the
that.
like memories are like that are just coming up from the conversation. Or
Sorry, say it
that's
again.
awesome. Uh, I hear what you're saying. You were just like, there's uh like memories that are popping up that you just haven't thought of in a while. You said
Yeah, yeah,
that's
yeah,
really
yeah,
cool. I love when that
yeah,
happens. It's like rediscovering parts of yourself again. It feels like.
yeah, 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 yeah. And I love your
Yeah.
questions because it's like coming from what I was saying, like looking for clarifications. It made me also clarify things inside. Like, wait, what does it have to be my parents' life with this? Of course, yeah, we live in the. I mean, thank you for that.
Yeah, and thank you for like just you kept it interesting. I like with Jeff, I sent like a bunch of questions that I was gonna ask you, and I didn't even use it. I literally just was following your stories, and it just continued to help me open up more questions. So,
That's how it usually
thank
goes, and that's also why I was able to sit back and just play my game because I knew that the two of you were just going to be able to hold the conversation down, just the two of you, for real. And
Okay.
dude.
I mean, I did know quite a bit about your story, but hearing you contextualize, okay, one thing happened, and then I kind of like I had to go to a different corporate world, or to a different world which was more corporate, and then that was able to show me some things which I've been able to notice you like impacted your work here at WinC. Like you during the time with like us trying to raise funds, I know that you and Lori have had conversations about like, okay, what's the logistics of this? How can we talk to people, persuade people, but also what do we need to think about when they're making these decisions? So it was really cool to see all of that.
Wow.
And we didn't even get to like
Wow.
what you did in what you do every single class period. Like people who are watching this, they're more aware, I think, than the average student is of like the behind the scenes stuff that happens. Um, but yeah, I mean, like it's Julie and I messaging each other about the codes for the attendance grade and for getting questions ready and setting up the summer course and doing a lot of those things so that Sam can focus on what he's actually going to teach. So the class wouldn't happen the way it does if it wasn't for Julie, because Sam would be too busy doing everything else. So yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Where's the
So
sound
my
effect? We need a sound
Somebody,
effect.
somebody needs to get hands dirty.
You said what gets hands dirty?
Yeah, somebody needs to get their hands dirty.
Exactly.
Yep. And that's the yep. And
Us.
that's the truth.
That's the team. That's the team. Thank you. Thank you guys. It was really cool, and thank you. I was so nervous to speak without this, I mean, like with a hard stop of English expressions
Yeah.
for a long time,
Eh,
but yeah, it was easy. I was not thinking on that at all. So
Good.
Yeah, and I didn't. There was nothing that was hard for me. Like you were speaking super clear and super easy to understand. So I'm glad. You shed so much light on, like so fluid, and I gained so much visualization from the stories. I'm like, I was like staring at the window, and like you'd think that I'm looking at the trees because I'm staring at the window, but really all I was seeing was pictures in my head. uh,
cool.
so yeah, that was awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Julie.
Thank you, Elijah.
And yeah, of course.
Thank you, Late.
I think next Wednesday, or either Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, we're going to be on with Jamie. I think she's going to be the next
Oh.
one because Niche currently is in Minnesota with DJ and doing some stuff out there on some Native American reservations. So when Niche gets back, we'll also have a conversation with her. But next week will be Jamie, I think.
Nice.
Awesome.
Let's go.
Awesome.
So
Yeah,
make sure you
I will be
subscribe and
there.
hit the notification bell so that you know when we go live, or join the Discord, ! Discord in the chat, because you'll get notifications over there as well.
Sweet.
All right. See you, everybody.
Okay.
That's a wrap.
Thank you. Yeah, bye.